Welcome to the 50th OpenChain webinar. We started this webinar series when COVID hit, and we wanted to make sure that people could still have information about what's going on in the market. We wanted to create that feeling of both presentations and the chance to ask questions to experts. So little did we realize in April 2020 that we would have 50 webinars within 3 years, which makes us, I think, probably the most prolific webinar creator in open source, which we've done on the tremendous budget of 0. Again, showing the sheer power of community. Now, today's webinar, and apologies, the birds are very excited behind me. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Southwest Japan. As you can see, I went outside because we're in the few days of maximum carry blades. So this is your scenery, and it's my enjoyable sunshine afternoon for this webinar, number 50. This is an important milestone, not just in DigEts, but because very important things are happening in our fields. We've talked a lot about how, for example, the OpenChain standards are going deeper and deeper in the supply chain. We know that in Germany, by way of example, due to a survey undertaken by Bitkom, sponsored by PwC, at 20% of companies with more than 2,000 employees are already using our ISO standard for open source software license compliance. Our standard for security assurance is new. It's only been out a few months. We're already seeing significant announcements. For instance, BlackBerry has decided to use it not just in a narrowly scoped program, but for their whole entity. But OpenChain is not working in isolation. We're dealing with the supply chain. And while the OpenChain standards for compliance or security are high level and they get you started, we're at the top of a pyramid. And as you go down the pyramid and fill out details, there are things you need and want to do. The first thing you need to do, indeed it's asked for by our standards, is get a software bill of materials. Recently, people have been talking a lot about software bill of materials, partly because of work in the US by, for instance, NTIA and the White House executive order, partly because the supply chain all over the world has reached the level of maturity where we know that software bill of materials can and must be done to manage open source software effectively. So today, we're going to cover a key part of that key part of supply chain management. We're going to get an overview of SPDX 3.0. The SPDX project is a sister project to OpenChain in the Linux Foundation. While we obsess about high-level process standards, they obsess about the practical matter of how do you make a clear, coherent software bill of materials that can be shared between companies. They released their specification, their standard many years ago. It's about 12 years old. They became an ISO standard about 2 years ago. So they are ISO 5962, released in 2021. And like any open source based project, any open source based approach, they didn't stay static. They've been evolving to meet market requirements. The next generation of their standard, called SPDX 3, and eventually it'll be an upgrade to the ISO number, but what we have today is SPDX 3, a de facto standard coming to market. It's a generational update of what is in the previous generation of SPDX, what is in the SPDX ISO standard. So it's an update that you should be aware of. It's coming to market as a de facto standard now. It will be coming to market as an ISO standard a little bit down the line. And as we all know, the procurement cycle takes a long time. We want to make sure we understand this, we're ready for this, we can make a decision about when and how we introduce it to our supply chain appropriate. Steve has a cough. Hi, Steve. So we're going to be talking about this today, and we're very, very lucky to have Alexius from Intel to do this presentation. He is one of the people in Europe most experienced in open source compliance, one of the people in Europe most experienced with software bill of materials, one of the people best positioned from working with SPDX, from working in the industry, to tell you what is this software bill of materials and what does it mean to you. Alexios, I've collaborated with you for more than a decade, and I have endlessly been grateful for your ability to mix strategy with technical. You have free reign today to do whatever you want in this webinar to help us get a picture of SPDX 3. We are recording and we will share this webinar with the world so that our community gradually in time zones where they're currently asleep will catch up as well. This webinar is not intended to be the beginning and the end of discussions around SPDX. It's intended to be a way to understand what's going on, to think about what's coming next, and to formulate your questions about what you want to know, what material do you need, etc. With all that in mind, and just before I hand over to Alexios, I will just show our antitrust policy notice. We show this at the beginning of every meeting. The full Linux Foundation antitrust policy is on our website, and you can access that. If you are a Linux Foundation member company, you can give any questions you have to our counsel, Andy Updegrove. Now, assuming that there's no questions about the antitrust policy notice, which is designed to make sure everyone's comfortable talking, I will hand over to my dear friend Alexios and let him do his presentation, which I must say is interesting because Alexios is doing the second presentation on SBOM in just 2 days for OpenChain. He just did OpenChain Germany. And yesterday, unfortunately, we had such an active conversation, we never got to see the full presentation. So today we have a whole bunch of our German work group rejoining to get the full presentation that we didn't get yesterday because we talked too much. So I shall stop talking now, hand over to you, Alexios, and away you go as long as you want. And everyone just be aware, you can jump in and ask questions at.
Great, Thank you for the kind words, Shane. And yeah, it's always a pleasure working with you and all this team. And I see many friends in the list of participants. So I'll be sharing and I'll be stop showing you my face because there are more interesting things. And I think when I'm sharing, I won't be able to see if there are raised hands or stuff like that. So just let me know and feel free to interrupt whenever you want, right? This is not...
I will make sure if there's any questions or raised hands that I flag them for you, Alexios.
Oh, thank you very much. So, right. So, let's get going. Lots of stuff there. And actually, these slides contain much more information that I will be speaking about. So when you get it afterwards, you'll have more reference points to information, but I will not be reading all the information that is in the slides. It's a lot. Shane mentioned that this is about SPDX 3, but it's actually not more. It also has a section that we're talking about is going to be talking about the developments of SBOMs that are happening, because we do have some developments in the last year. So this is an update, what's happening in the field, in general field of SBOMs and the specific SPDX format. So bear with me, we'll be discussing lots of things. SBOM, I assume everyone has a general understanding of what an SBOM is. You know, it's an integral part of OpenChain specification, I'm sure, if you all know. So in the past couple of years, there's been more and more talk about SBOMs and general acceptance and understanding that, yeah, this is an important part of any open source management strategy. And so it used to be, you see the logos on the left, from the US federal government sites. It used to be a specific group in NTIA that was working on it. Now the work has a little shifted to CISA, the last logo there. But again, so people now understand and expect that this SBOM is going to be an integral part of our software supply chain industry, right? So an SBOM, as we all know, is a record containing the details and supply chain relationships of components in software, right? So remember, the whole idea is in order to when software is transferred from one to the other during the supply chain links, you have to express some information, meta information about the software, right? It's not only that I give you some software, I have to tell you what's inside the software. This is the common bill of materials, and then where I got it from or how it was created, and meta information about the software. Licensing was the initial part that we started working, as Shane said, 12, 13 years ago. And it's not only license information, it might be security information. We have lots of information right now, and I'll be talking about these in the next minutes. So I assume you have all seen that now NTIA has guidance. It shows, hey, when you have an SBOM, this is the minimum information that you have to put in there. And it really says, it should be an automated, as much as possible, an automated process. We don't want to do manual things again and again. And it talks about, what are the practices and processes, and this is exactly where OpenChain neatly fits in, right? And it actually, defines a table of minimum elements, set of minimum elements, not really very completely specified, but people understand, when I give you an SBOM, when I create an SBOM, it has to have at least this stuff. And SPDX, as you can imagine, since we were part of all the discussions all along, supports everything there and many more out of that. We've actually created one of the last year's projects was to create a checker that takes an SBOM and says, yes, this complies with the NTIA definition of it contains at least the minimum elements that are there. But then when we were discussing all this stuff during the last couple of years, we realized that at some points we were talking past each other, right? It wasn't always, one would say SBOM, SBOM as in an abstract concept, but people would start understanding SBOMs as different things. And this boiled down to, for everyone involved in software is not a static thing, so it has a whole life cycle, right? So I don't know even where to start from the circle because it's a never-ending process. But you plan, you develop, you build, you test, you release, and then somebody else installs it and runs it, and then you get a new version and all this stuff. And in every piece of this life cycle, you have changes to the software, right? Maybe you use external libraries, maybe you, in the build part, you take the source and maybe you compile it, generate a binary and all this stuff, right? So at each point, at each snapshot of all this circle, right, the software is in one state, but it doesn't mean that an SBOM accurately describes every piece of this circle, right? Because the SBOM is a snapshot, is a static document, and you have to know at which point in your life cycle the SBOM corresponds. So there was an effort underway to start defining these things and start talking about, you're talking about an SBOM when you develop software. Oh, you're talking about an SBOM about the software that is being released. And this resulted in very nice categorizations, and to the people who thought that having one SBOM was a trouble, we found out, there are many things that can go with an SBOM, and there are different types of SBOMs, right? And I'm not going to be reading all of them and explain all of them, but you understand some of this is, the second one, which is the source. Sorry, was there a comment? Apparently not. So yeah, so you see the second type is the if you have the source, you have the development environment, and then you look at each source file, for example, and you can provide information. The last one is, you only get a binary and executable, and you have to analyze it in order to create an SBOM, right? We're always talking about SBOMs. We're only talking about software, bill of materials and information about software. But at which part of the life cycle you are, maybe you can generate a different view of the software. And a rough approximation of the different things that we were talking about is, different kind of SBOMs happen in different points in the software life cycle. And this has been very, very useful to understand each other and saying we now have some common, language and vocabulary to talk to each other, because you're talking about, a source SBOM. I'm talking about an analyzed of an artifact of a binary analysis SBOM, or what happened when something is being deployed in a system. So having this common vocabulary and language really helped all the discussions going ahead, right? Because at some point, we were we were a little overwhelmed. So this will be published, I assume, in the near future by CISA, because that's where the work is being done under the auspices of this organization, and it will be published at some report, I assume that it's coming. Now, I've seen you've heard from SPDX. This is the typical graphical representation that we use for SPDX 2. The last version of SPDX 2 is 2.3, and it specifies all the information that you put inside the software bill of materials, right? SPDX itself, is an ISO standard, as Shane mentioned before, 5962. It's freely available from the ISO website. It's not only there, obviously, we have a website where we have the complete specification there for your perusal. And one of the nice things about SPDX is that it has a model of the actual entities and all the information that is there, right? And we can, once we have the model, we can have different ways to actually, save it into a file if you want, right? What we call serialization, right? So we even have spreadsheet, which some people have. We have a formal RDF definition for you have a pure textual format for tag value, and then you have XML, JSON, YAML, or whatever you want to create. It's and all these formats are interchangeable. You don't care. You can automatically transform from one to the other. So if you prefer to generate JSON, but the person who receives it prefers to receive YAML, all this stuff is being transparently converted between formats. That's the easy part now. Right. One of the major advantages of SPDX is that we spend lots of time during meetings discussing all the different relationships between the different elements inside an SBOM, right? So as you can imagine, when you start thinking about it, you say, oh, this is a software and it contains this component, right? And contains is one of the relationships. And then we started, going deeper and deeper and deeper. And, we have a use case. One of the important things for SPDX is that because it's an open specification and it's been developed by a very open and welcoming group of people, we have, contributions from, I would definitely say more than hundreds of people who come up with their own use case, right? And we are completely open for that. So if, and I was talking yesterday to another development team who wanted to use SPDX for their use case, and they said, yeah, but this does not describe none of these describe what we want to record. And the answer is yes, please tell us, and we can add more. If we have a concrete use case, right? That's why the standard is made so extensible. So we have these things that are relationships between elements, and then we can add more relationship type. And as you can imagine, as we start tackling more and more complex software, and there are going to be more relationships there, and I'll be mentioning a couple of them later in the presentation, right? So besides the simple contains, some software contains, then you start thinking, okay, maybe this is documentation, this is a dependency, but it's not a single type. There's not a single type of dependency. Maybe it's a build dependency or development dependency or a runtime dependency. And at some point, you might want to have this information, or you might not. Everything, as you can imagine, is completely optional, and you can go as deep as you want to go, right? So there are lots of information in the following slides about, a progress report, what happened in 2022, and I'll be just skimming through that. As you can imagine, I don't know if you know, but SPDX project produces a couple of things. One is the SPDX license list, which is a list of commonly used licenses so that they get a very short identifier so that people can refer to, by the identifier, to refer to the license, right? So we can say BSD 3 clause, and everybody understands this is this license that we all know and we're talking about, right? I have to remind you that 10 years ago, before SPDX was there, and before we had this, everybody was not sure how to call, and actually everybody was calling it with a different name. There was 3 clause BSD, there was BSD new style, there was Berkeley license, there were and hundreds of other books. So having a common vocabulary again really helps any information exchange. So license list is the list of licenses exceptions. The specification is the main part where we define the format of the SPDX data, right? And then we also produce tooling, so not complete high-level tools doing all your compliance stuff, but mostly, libraries in different programming languages, for example, that handle, read, and write the format according to the specification. And then people build on top of them. So, as I said, I'll run through that. The SPDX license list, again, this is what happened in last year. We keep adding new licenses. You see the last release that happened a month ago. we added, 40 new licenses and stuff. So I think now we're reached 500 or something like that. We're almost there. So yeah, and one of the milestones was that Fedora last summer adopted the identifier. So everything that Fedora now does has an SPDX identifier, which from the other point helped us increase and expand our license list, because now Fedora contributes all these different licenses that they have, and they get new identifiers and they're added to the list, right? So the specification, again, yeah, we've added more things. Last summer, again, we released 2.3, and this February in FOSDEM, we ran for the first time an SBOM dev room, where we were discussing SBOM things. That was the first time that FOSDEM had a track like that, and it was very lively and very very informative. We had lots of presentations. So the tools, as I said, I'm definitely not going to talk about any release, but you see we have tools in Java, in Python, in Golang. We have online tools that translate formats and stuff like that. We have vulnerability looking. We have this thing that I mentioned before, that we check whether an SBOM is conformant with the NTIA specification. Lots of tools being released. OpenSSF, which is another foundation looking about the security in open source, right? They have a specific work stream that tries to tries to address the issue of SBOMs that should be everywhere, right? And they were instrumental in having funding the work for more development of the SPDX Python tools. As I mentioned at the beginning, the NTIA now moved to CISA. The most work is being done. As you can imagine, lots of groups being there, lots of international coordination, Europe, Japan, everybody's working on the same things. So that was the general update on what's happening in the SBOM area. And now I'm going to be talking about the SPDX 3, but let me just stop for a second and ask if there are any questions on the SBOMs in general before we delve into SPDX formats.
I don't have a question on SBOMs in general. I just wanted to say I think this was a great overview. A lot of people are aware that SBOMs is a trending topic, and it can be quite shocking then to find out that there's so much choice around SBOM. So it was very good to summarize what's going on.
Actually, in the slides, I'm missing the wonderful news that I'm sure you've seen it. If you haven't, 2 days ago, GitHub introduced SBOMs. So in every repository on GitHub, you can click now a button and you have an SBOM generated for the software that you host there, which is wonderful. The implementation still has bugs, as most implementations have, but okay, it's a hosted service, so when we submit fixes and improvements, GitHub will make it, I assume they will make the update transparent, but for people who, like us, who live inside the compliance space, we've heard of SBOMs and we probably know how to set up things. But this gives the visibility, to millions of other developers who have never heard of even the term SBOM. They now have a new button and see, what does that do? And we can start discussing more and more about that. That was great news just a couple of days ago. Right. So SPDX 3, yay. Let's continue. As Shane said, OpenChain looks at the big picture and policies, and SPDX is very low, much more low level, and we eventually talking about, the exact bytes that are going to be inside your table, your bill of materials. How do you represent the information? So I've shown that before. This is the typical view of an SPDX version 2. And as you can see, it's a very layered approach that besides the initial document information, it has the levels of package, file, and snippet, right? So there is a package where package does not mean something from a package manager. It just means a collection of files, right? You call it a package. And each package contains files, and files may contain snippets because people copy-paste things, right? And then you have information about the license and stuff. So this was the model in version SPDX version 2. SPDX version 3, that's why we changed also the major release number. We went crazy, not crazy, but anyway, and we made a much more interconnected model of things, of objects or elements. We call them elements, think of them as objects or things or whatever. So instead of having just specific the layers of package file snippets, we're talking about things in general. And then these things, files are types of things and packages are types of things. So we're talking about general things, elements, and relationships between them and all this stuff. So it's a very graph-oriented approach if you want. So yeah, and I'll be talking more about this thing. So this is a major change, and this really freed us so that we can have many more information represented there and have the actual model be extensible a lot. Right, so everything is much more modular. We have the core module, the core model that just defines what I'm going to be using terms now, the element, what an element is. So it only defines element and relationships between elements and a few other things, right? Then we have things that we call profiles, and profiles are areas of interest that people want to put information in the SBOM. So there is obviously the software profile as in general things, so that this defines, things like file and package and software and like that. And then we have profiles for each of the use case, right? About licensing and usage and security and build, because we found out that, even in SPDX 2, when you have the rigid distinction, the hierarchy of package file snippet, then you want to have license information for each one of them, and maybe security information, and maybe build information, and all this stuff. So all these things we carved out into different profiles, because there are definitely use cases where you want to say, yeah, but I'm interested in the licensing part, and there is another team that is going to be looking at the security part, and we don't want all this information to be completely intermixed. It can always be, everything can be inside one SBOM, right? But having it separate, it's much more, you can present it much more easily to the people, because as you probably already know, if you have set up, OpenChain processes, it's not the same people who look at all the information, right? There are, people who are concerned with licensing, and they only care about licensing, and they say, I don't care about, vulnerability and security information. There are other people who look at security and say, I don't care what the license is, I do care about the security part, right? So we separated this into different profiles, and this also helped us doing a much more flexible and modular model. And it also helped us to work faster, because essentially all these different boxes that you see are breakout teams who are interested in that, and they work and they come up with their definitions and their use cases, and then we merge everything together and we join everything. So instead of having large group of people trying to, discuss everything. We have many different teams having parallel meetings and working much faster to that. So we set up an infrastructure where you define your, these boxes that you saw in the diagram, and what are the properties and classes and what the metadata. So you say each file should have a name. Yes, okay. And does it have, can it have, when the name will be a string, and can it be one or multiple, or is it optional, and all this stuff. So we have a pretty formal approach to specifying all that. And since it's specified, then it's automatically converted. And the idea is that you can generate the complete ontology afterwards, and then you can generate, the JSON LD or JSON schema, or, and all these things can be generated automatically from one source of truth, let's call it like that, right? And the different profiles that we said, like licenses or security, can add their own boxes and their own diagram in that, and they all fit together. So this was pretty nice development, and helped us going a lot further. So the core model, as I said, the base just defines, I don't know if it's visible because the boxes are pretty small, but it defines a central box, which is an element, and then, relationships between them. As you can see, there is nothing there that even, talks about SPDX or anything like that. This is just, the things that we're going to be talking about. And then on top of that, you build, for example, the software profile, right? And the software profile are the light green things. But there, we obviously have, package file and snippets. We have, 10 years of experience, and we know that this is a nice way to represent software, right? And then you have an SBOM and dependencies, and and we know what, as you can imagine, everything in version 2 can easily be represented in version 3. Yeah, it's not, we do not make strange model. It's the format that changes, right? The information underneath, we obviously, what we have been keeping for all these 10 years, we still want to keep, right? There's no big change there. So licensing profile has the license information that was an integral part of an SPDX 2. Right. Again, it doesn't change much. Everything is as you already know it. We still have licenses, and from the license list, you have license expressions. We want to now introduce custom exceptions, which were not. That's the last bullet on the first, the last sub bullet on the first bullet. We did not have this capability in SPDX 2, and we're now trying to do it. There is a change happening these days, actually. And so you will see that, again, I will not be reading all the details of what's happening in every profile, but as you can see, most of it, they have done it. They work on a specific branch in the model on the GitHub. Everybody contributes there. We're discussing this in specific meetings. Yep, that's how the work still goes. So this is about information. Security does the same thing. We still have the old information that it was already in SPDX 2, but we want to add some more. And we very closely tracks the VEX efforts, and which is a format, well, it's a family of formats, little different each with the other, how to convey some vulnerability information. Yep, all the stuff we put there. There is a build profile, which is focused on reproducibility and security. So you say, okay, when I have this binary, how was it created, right? And it took this and this information. It was run in this system and stuff like that. So you put information like that on this profile. We're starting looking at the AI, as you can imagine, new stuff. And this really makes a change because, yeah, AI software, if you've ever dealt with it, it's different, right? So it's not only the software, the code, but you have a model which gets trained from a data set, and then you have a trained model that is produced. So you want, ideally, you want to be able to record all this information. Remember, the SPDX is a way to record all the information about software, right? So we have to add completely new things, right? That how do you record that it's a model, the data set that was used to train it, and what you get distributed, and all the information, the meta information that you've heard before from other profiles about licensing and security and build. All this applies to these things as well, right? These new types of elements. But yeah, we're expanding into that. And for example, for the AI profile, like any package software, right? It has the things in the middle that are typical for any software, like version and licenses, release date and stuff. But you see on the right-hand side, the team that is working for the AI said, we want to keep more information, energy consumption, because this is an important thing in AI. Or does it have personal information in there? What are the parameters and risk assessments and metrics and stuff like that? So we continuously expand the information that is capable to be represented in SPDX by adding more use cases. So yeah, we're completely open about that. So this is the AI profile, very similar. It's a data set, right? Which we can, again, on the right-hand side, you see new things that definitely were not there in SPDX2 because we did not have this information, right? So now it's very easy to have the modular, because of the modular design, to have, let's put information about biases and sensors used and confidentiality and stuff like that, right? Because people care about this information. And a different profile, another profile is usage. So when we're talking about software, yes, but this is a design or this is a test and it's a prototype. It's not the final version. And this, until now, the only way that we did that was by using, overloading the version part and having comments in there. But yeah, these are very specific things. So maybe we should have different properties to record this part of the information. Then there is obviously the SPDX Lite profile, right? So this is a very a subset so that you can have a very small and very light, as it said, subset of information that it can be specified, and it's always obviously satisfies the minimum elements from NTIA, but yeah, it doesn't need the whole thing of the whole graph. And you probably know it better than me. OpenChain Japan working group is instrumental in having this. And yeah, so this is all the parallel work that is being done for 3.0, and after 3.0, we want to add even more things. And one of the major things is let's start discussing hardware, right? There are use cases that you have to know, hey, this software is running on this system. So there has to be a way to record this system, right? So maybe you want to record what kind of CPU is being used and stuff like that. So as you can imagine, this is very crucial when you don't only look at the software supply chain, but maybe you have a medical device which has embedded software, right? And the medical device, you want to record the software, but yeah, why not record the hardware as well? It makes sense, right? And Kate is leading the effort on that one. And after, besides hardware, there is safety, right? And safety is very important, as you can imagine. And we want to be able to record this. And this is a specific to profile. We're talking about functional safety, right? Which is, and again, specification. So you see, this will happen in 3.1. We will not be delaying 3.0 in order to have this, and because this is still in the works. But again, the whole idea is, I'm trying to convey it again and again, we're completely open and we want to put more information in there. So if you want anything, please talk to us. Oh yeah, nice, that's the next slide. Yeah, so if you have a use case that you want to make sure that you can record the information in SPDX, please tell us about it. If we don't know it, we cannot make sure that it's available to you, right? So just tell us about it, join the list. This is open an issue. This is for the SPDX 2 version if you want to have some changes there in the previous format. But, just, let us know, and we'll work with anyone to just try to be able to record more information. And I think that's it. Yay, managed.
That was incredible, Alexius. It's been quite challenging looking at the amount of activity and the scale of what's happening in SPDX to understand an overview of this initiative. So this has been a wonderful presentation. And I see we already have some questions. We have a question from Christian about this SPDX 3 support cryptography data that is needed for export control compliance.
Oh, there is, I think there's a group that works, they have expressed interest in doing the export part. I haven't heard that they have come up yet with, a concrete proposal for that. If you want to contribute, please help us. Yeah. Again, export is a little tricky, right? Because people talk about export as a short, a shortcut of US export, but actually export is for every country, right? So every country has their own export designation and stuff like that. So yeah, if we want to record it, it's definitely useful information, and yeah, we want to have it there. Yeah.
And some general information for people who might be new on the call. OpenChain does have an export control working group. It's focused on just finding resources that might be interesting for open source export control. If someone wants to talk about something like this and they turn up there, they are most welcome. Stephen in the chat, he said, good to see SBOM types on slide 6. The OpenChain telco workgroup was looking for existing definitions of when an SBOM was created. So it's worth telco looking at this, but it sounds like it's still a work in progress. Is that correct, at the SBOM types? The when part is work in progress.
Work in progress. Yeah, everything always is a work in progress. It has not been published by a federal agency yet, right? So it will be published by CISA, right? I don't think anyone from the team that was initially working for that is still working on that. I mean, it has been submitted to the CISA, and it will be published there. So I think from the OpenSSF, the people who work there, I think they're happy with this set, and it's waiting to be published, right? So yeah, I don't expect many changes to happen that, but it's not an official publication of federal government yet, right?
Excellent.
But you can definitely start using the terms, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I will be looking at it for the telco work group.
Great. Yeah. Thanks.
Marvelous. That's really good to know, Mark-Etienne. Maybe you, for those who aren't aware, is the chair of the work group, and maybe you can go over this in future calls, and everyone should know that everyone is welcome to dial into the telco work group or any other work group in OpenChain. As Alexios has highlighted many times, everything that we're doing in projects like SPDX or OpenChain is open. So if you think, oh, it might be interesting to talk about SBOM types, oh, telco groups talking about it, it's fine not to be from a telecommunications company. Dial in, see what's happening, ask questions. You are super welcome. Oh, this is good. The how to get involved. I mean, sometimes this is one of the things that people look at stuff happening and think, oh, well, it's fine, but blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's your standard. go and make it, go and improve it.
This is our GitHub presence, right? So lots of things are happening on GitHub. Lots of things are happening in meetings. And I should have put it there. Yeah. Okay. So there is a specific repo that lists all the all the meetings happening for every room with, all the time zones and all the different times and, how to join every meeting, links to Zitzi or Zoom or whatever. Yeah, we have lots of different things. So yeah, if you want to, participate in everything, your week will be completely full. So yeah, you will choose the things that you're more interested in. So one of the repos under SPDX is SPDX/meetings, and yeah, it has information where each of the teams is meeting and how they communicate.
And it's also just worth highlighting that because you can participate, as Alexio said, you can choose where to participate, you can make a difference in everything that's done, whether it's how the ISO standard is written, whether it's how example or reference material is presented or tooling is done. You can directly contribute. Just pausing to see if we've got any more questions.
Yes, just one question about SPDX 3. If you have a software and you ask for an SBOM in SPDX 2, you get one file. In SPDX 3, when you ask for an SBOM, how many files will we get? Will we get one for licensing and one for security, or a global one, or different files? How are they related?
Well, you can have it in any way you want, right? So what I presented, the diagrams with the boxes and stuff, this is the, how do we call it? The information model, right? This is what the data actually is, right? But how to actually serialize it and save it to a file, it's very well specified again, right? But you can have a single file containing all the information, or you can have different files with information split and pointing to each other. In SPDX 2, it was the same, right? You could receive a single file, or you could receive more SPDX documents and one pointing to the other. So if you have a collection of packages, maybe you get a different SPDX document for each one of them, and you have one document pointing to the others. So it's the same idea here, a little expanded. So you can definitely have a, serialization, as we call it, right? That puts everything in a single file, and then you take it and you extract the information that you care about. So yeah, don't worry about that. Or you can have many small ones, it doesn't matter.
Okay,
and it's very easy to convert. Yeah.
Do we have some practical examples of SPDX3 SBOMs available somewhere?
That's what we're trying now to create, right? As you can imagine, it's a continuous thing, because we're evolving the specification. So the people who write, most of the people who write the actual code say, yes, we're waiting for the specification to settle down a little before we start writing code. On the other hand, we want to have some prototypes. So yeah, we're working on that also. As you can see in the screen, we have the SPDX examples that has version 2. We're going to be putting SPDX 3 examples there as well, right? Now we're at the level that we create the examples by hand, right? And we don't want to have these, very widely circulated, because we have to make sure that the tools actually follow the specification and create it exactly the correct thing.
Thank you.
I do have another question here. So, Alexius, the whole tooling things, all the three current tools are developed in independent way. They are not connected in anything. And today they actually not produce exactly the same result. Is there any plan for the 3.0 that we can do in a validation of all the tools, doesn't matter which language is written, provide the same results? Because somehow it's difficult to handle this.
Right, yeah. So the three tools that, for example, that you see here, the libraries for Python and Golang and Java, they were developed completely independently, right? So yeah, they all looked at the spec and implemented it, and yeah, that's good. The importance of the thing that I said, that the language, the specification now, it's very formally specified, right? Is the way that it's going, the single source of truth, that we both love this word, this phrase, right? So yeah, we have a single source of truth, which are the special files that we have put in the SPDX 3 model, right? That says exactly what all the information is, right? So all the tools will be based on that one, right? Ideally, we would have tools that actually read the specification automatically and generate the code. But yeah, I don't know if we're going to reach that point. But yeah, it will be much more, the three versions or any implementation based on this specification will be much more aligned, because yeah, remember, in version 2 we started from text, right? Human written and readable text that people interpreted. Now we're doing it, we're looking at machines first instead of humans. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Sure.
All right, and there we are reaching the hour, so it's time to wrap up. Alexius, thank you for an incredible presentation, a wonderful 50th webinar for us. We will be back to you and the rest of the SPDX ecosystem as things develop. So this is the starting point. For those of you who are heading to our next OpenChain meeting, it's happening on Microsoft Teams. It's the German work group working on the translation of our online training material. I just put the link in the chat. For those of you who are not, thank you for being here today. And once again, Alexius, thank you for this, and thank you for everything you have done so far. We're depending on you to do even more in the future.
Thank you very much, and please join and help us. Yes, yes.
Yes. Take care. Bye-bye all.
Bye all.